Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia Daf Kufir Dalit. Today's stuff is sponsored by the Hadran women of Long Island in honor of the birth of a grandson, son of David and Avuha Lewis, to our friend and co-learner Debbie Portnoy. May the Portnoy Lewis family see much nachat as the new Raba grows to Torah and Daf. And may the Simcha bring joy, peace, and healing to the Jewish nation and the world. Let's alter. Okay, reminder to register for the Siyum Wednesday night, and anyone who's in, or Wednesday, wherever you are, and whoever is in Israel and wants to join one of the Siyumim, so you can look on the Hebrew side of our daf. There's a bunch of Siyumim. There's also a Hebrew Siyum on Tuesday evening. If anybody wants to join, that's at 8 o'clock Israel time, and we hope to see you all there. Remember to register. Okay, we're going to get started with the bottom of our daf. So we're starting with a question. Let's just go back to what we've been discussing. And it's a very interesting topic. It's going to be also the central topic of today's daf, which is the topic of mesadrim lebal chov. Okay, this is a law that's learned out from arakhin, which again is I give the value of a person to the temple. If I can't afford to give the value that I'm supposed to be giving, that's a set value according to the Torah. If I can't afford that amount, then the kohen comes and assesses what my financial situation is, what are the basic needs that I need, and then I only pay whatever's left of my responsibility. The question is, when there's a malveh and a loveh, do we do the same thing? And do we learn it from Gzeira Shava? We're going to learn from Imach Merkacha and V'chiyamuchachicha. The same word appears in both places. Can we learn from arakhin to Baal Chov? And this means, we saw yesterday, that when we insist, that the loba has to return the full amount of the loan, but the loba can't do that without having to go into major debt and not have basic needs. Then there was this whole question, are we mesadrim or not? Now, Rav Nachman said, it seems clear that according to Rashbag, which he seems to hold by, who says after 30 days of you not paying and we seized your collateral, we sell the collateral immediately. And then after 30 days, not immediate, but at the 30-day point, we sell it. Rav Nachman had said, it seems very clear from here, even though you quoted me some bright, that Rashbag thinks that mesadrim, lo mesadrim, because remember, we ended with saying, according to Rashbag, what does mesadrim mean? That if you have a cloak, right, we sell it and we give you a lesser quality cloak. And according to Rashbag, everyone is like the children of kings, and therefore, everyone with their basic needs are what they have. You can't kind of reduce someone to a level where they're not. And if everyone we treat as the children of kings, that means everyone is worthy of your basic item need is actually something of much higher value. And there's no such thing as replacing it for something less. And therefore, Rav Nachman thinks there's no such thing as mesadrim lebal chov, doesn't agree with that idea. Now we're asking a question. If you do say mesadrim lebal chov, then matkefla Rav Chaga, last line of Kufyu Gimel, v'lemale lavalai karamit. Why can't the person just say the malveh, like, why is this my responsibility? And this is really the central question. Why is this my responsibility to make sure that the loba has food on the, food to eat or clothing to wear? Basically, the malveh could say, first of all, think about it. The malveh already helped this person. This person needed money. The malveh lent him money. So why now, when it's time for the malveh, the creditor, to get their money back, why are we forcing them to take back less money in order that the loba should be able to survive? Why is it my problem? To which Amalei Abaye, here's a really, really key important point, Ivra. The Rashi says here, be'emet. Yes, truly, ale kahami. It's your responsibility. As a creditor, you have a responsibility toward the person who owes you the money. Mishum shenemar ulecha tiyeh tzedakah. And that was in the pasuk, right? Hashev tashiv lo tavo k'va. Hashem make sure to return it, right? V'shacha b'salato ubeirachacha ulecha tiyeh tzedakah l'fnei Hashem elokecha. And right, it will be righteous. It will be good for you. It will be charity. However you define this tzedakah, it's clearly a word of saying you want to appear proper before God. The way to do that is to behave in this manner. And this is basically saying, and it's a theme we've seen all throughout. It's very interesting to have a lot of the focus on this at the end of the Masechet, right? Because this whole section is really all about this idea of tzedakah, giving charity, being kind to other people. Is that, and we've seen throughout the the Masechet, this idea of Asita Torah Yashar Ben Hashem, you should do what's good and just and straight in the eyes of God, which is translated as Lifnim Shurat Hadin, going beyond the letter of the law. And we talked about this before, that there's cases where beyond the letter of the law, when you think of beyond the letter of the law, it's often beyond, like this isn't law. Okay, if you want to do beyond, do this, but you're not required by law. But sometimes Lifnim Shurat Hadin is the law, and that's what we have here. All these laws that the Torah set up here, and the laws that we're discussing now, are they Torah law? Are they not? Do you have to be mesadrim? So according to those who say mesadrim, yes, this is the law. It's beyond the letter of the law, but it's the law. In other words, yes, you're right. You are supposed to get your money back. But if it means that this person is going to be below the poverty line and won't be able to survive and won't be able to make it, then sorry, but your responsibility in this world is to ensure that they have what they need. And we're going to get back to this idea. We're going to have a whole story today, a very interesting story. And we're going to talk about that. I think it's connected to this whole concept. They're still questioning because we had different opinions. Some people think that what they're asking here is, okay, so what's the bottom line? Mesadrin or lo mesadrin? It's pretty important to know because this probably comes up a lot. So some people think they're asking actually some other question, but we're gonna go with this interpretation. Mi gamar micha arakhin or lo? Do we learn this gzera shava from arakhin or do we not? Now we finally see the gzera shava inside. At least they mentioned micha. The same root appears in both places. Do we learn it from arakhin or do we not learn it from arakhin? Tashma. Let's learn it from here. And we're going to have is the shalach Rabban beigarte. Rabban sent a letter. I asked all the rabbis. Nobody knew to answer me. Now you see that this is a question. You can see already from the sugya. We've kind of rehashed it. Do we learn from arakhin? Don't we learn from arakhin? Yeah, Okay, and people just didn't really know the answer. But you know what? One day I was in the Beit Midrash and I heard them ask the following question about something else. But from their answer, it was obvious what they held. So let's see. We talked about arakhin. I give the value of a person to the temple. I say, erech ploni alai, the value of so-and-so is on me. There's a certain amount according to Torah I have to give. It's a fixed amount. There's also what's called hekdesh. That's a different topic. Hekdesh is, I say, I'm giving X to the temple, okay, an object, an amount of money. So here they're giving a classic case of hekdesh. I say, I'm going to give 100 zuzim to the temple for the use in the temple, for upkeep of the temple. Hi, maushi sadru. Is it like arakhin? Do we do mesadrim? What if I can't afford 100 zuzim? Do I have to give the whole amount? Rabbi Yaakov mishmei de barpada and Rabbi Yomi mishmei de ilfa, right? So now we have three categories. We're talking about arakhin mesadrim. Again, just to have it very clear, arakhin is 100% clear from the Torah that mesadrim, because the Torah says the kohen goes in, assesses what you have, and assesses what you can pay. And if you can't pay the full amount, then we deduct. That's 100%. Whether or not we apply it to arakhin was question number one. And now question number two is, do we apply, right? Do we learn gzera shava or not? Question number two is, does it apply to hekdesh? So we have Rabbi Yaakov in the name of Barpada, and Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishmei de Ilfa in the name of Ilfa, who both said Amrei, Kal v'chomer mi Baal Chov. We'll learn it out from Baal Chov, Kal v'chomer argument. And now we're going to see that they knew the answer for Baal Chov, and they're going to learn from there to hekdesh. So we're going to get off track because we're going to be focusing on hekdesh, but really all that concerns us is, well, what do they say about Baal Chov and this Kal v'chomer? Uma Baal Chov shemachzirin ein mesadrin, hekdesh she'em machzirin ein odin she'em mesadrin. Okay, we're comparing laws of Baal Chov we have to return the collateral, right? Remember the law. You take a collateral. If they're poor, you have to return it to them at night if it's their pajamas, if it's their blanket that they sleep on or their pillow. If it's something they wear during the day or need during the day for their work, then you have to return it during the day. There's this law that you have to return. So that's one law, that if you take collateral, you have to return it. Law number two is, if you took a collateral and now you're going to sell that collateral, you have to deduct that amount, right? The amount they need to live. So if in Baal Chov, you do have to return it every day, but you don't have to do mesadrim, which now we get an answer. That's all we needed. We could have stopped right here. So you don't have to do mesadrim. You say, okay, there is no law of mesadrim. This matches what Rav Nachman said. Then let's finish the kal vachomer though. Hekdesh. Let's say I say I'm going to give 100 zuzim to the temple, and I don't pay. So the treasurer of the court of the temple comes to me and says, okay, pay up, and I don't pay. They can seize an item of mine for collateral. Do they have to return it to me? No, they don't have to return it to me every day, every night. No, there's no such law. We never saw such a law. It doesn't exist. So hekdesh she'em machzirin, ein odin she'em mesadrim. So if in hekdesh there is a machzirin, obviously there won't be mesadrim because, right? If in collaterals for a baal chov, for a creditor, yes, machzirin, but not mesadrim. So in a place where you don't even have the din to return it every day, you obviously are not going to have the law that you have to deduct. That's their logical assumption. Rabbi Yochanan has a different opinion and says, no, and this is about hekdesh. So we're off our topic right now. Because again, we only brought it for that line, baal chov e mesadrim. That's what we wanted to know. There's no law of mesadrim for baal chov. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with these two people that we saw and says, it says neder be'arkacha. This is a pasuk. Now, this pasuk connects neder, which is a vow. Now, what's a vow? Hekdesh. Hekdesh is a vow. I promise, I vowed to bring something to the temple. So there's hekdesh, which is a vow, and it's juxtaposed to the word erkechai, with your value. Now, neder be'arkacha means something else, but what they're saying is there's neder and there's arakhin together in the same pasuk. We're going to learn from one to the other. So if arakhin is our place where we know for sure mesadrim, we're going to then say it's true for nidarim as well. Ma arakhin mesadrim, af hekdesh mesadrim. Okay, and there you have a different opinion about hekdesh. But again, it's not our topic. But we have a debate also about hekdesh. Do we learn it from baal chov? And then the answer is no, through a kal vachomer argument. Or do we learn it from a hekdesh, a juxtaposition, from arakhin? V'idach, now we're just stuck in this back and forth between these two people. What does the first opinion do with the words neder be'arkacha? If they don't darshan it to say, let's make a juxtaposition between hekdesh and arakhin for this issue of mesadrim, what do they do with it? It's to teach us this other law that applies by hekdesh just like it applies by arakhin. Now, if I say I'm giving the value of a person to the temple, there's a certain set amount I have to bring. If I say I'm giving the value of my heart to the temple, or someone's heart to the temple, or someone's liver to the temple, if you would take out their liver, they would die. So that's what it means, nidom b'chvodo. It means that how much do I have to give? We don't evaluate what's the value of your heart to your body. The value of your heart to your body is your entire body. Because if we take out your heart, you'll die. So any item, that's what it means, l'chvodo. Any item is judged at its value. So if a part of a body is something the body needs, it's vital for the body's survival, then if someone says, I'm giving the value of that organ to the temple, you actually have to bring the value of a complete person, because it's according to its worth, basically, and its worth is a complete worth of the body. So just like that's true for the world of arakhin, which is if I use the word erech, this body part on me, value, then it's going to be the same for hekdesh. What's the difference between hekdesh and valuations? If I say I'm giving demay, the dummy, the monetary value of this limb to the temple. Okay, what's the difference between wording it this way, wording it that way? We're going to get to all that in Masechet Erech, we have a while, but I promise we'll get there. So this is just a side halacha that the other person learns from there, because they don't learn the other halacha. Now we go back to these two opinions we mentioned, and we're going to question them. So the first one had this kal vachomer argument, and so we're going to learn from a kal vachomer from baal chov, that machzirim but not mesadrim, to hekdesh, where we're going to say, since there's no din of returning the collateral to them every day, therefore there's clearly no din of mesadrim. But now they say, why don't we just say yisadru bebaal chov kal vachomer me'arakhin? Why don't we make the kal vachomer from arakhin and not from the baal chov? And then we would learn that yes, I'm sorry, I just said it wrong. Why don't we say yes? Why is the assumption in the first case? Okay, the whole thing. Remember, Rabin said no one answered me directly, but then I heard this kal vachomer, and by the way, I learned that Baal Chomer mesadrim, because it was part of this Kal Vachomer argument. It was obvious to them that Baal Chomer mesadrim. So now they ask, okay, let's assume why Baal Chomer mesadrim, because there's no Gezerah Shava. Remember, Gezerah Shava is something when you take the same word and you say, oh, this word appears here, this word appears there. Let's learn all the laws of one to the other. That's only if you have a tradition about it. If you don't have a tradition, then you can't do the Gezerah Shava. So while we maybe understand there's some people who don't have Gezerah Shava, and maybe that's why they said mesadrim b'Baal Chov, but you should be able to learn it from a Kal Vachomer argument from arakhin. So this is a question on Ilfa and Barpada, who basically said, as part of their Kal Vachomer about hekdesh, but mentioned that Baal Chov mesadrim. Why? Why would they have an opinion like that? Why wouldn't you say Kal Vachomer from arakhin? And the idea is, if they're going to make a Kal Vachomer from Baal Chov to hekdesh using all these parameters of machzirin and mesadrim and the relationship between them, why wouldn't they make a Kal Vachomer from arakhin, where it's obvious that mesadrim, and learn from there that Baal Chov mesadrim? Now, what's the Kal Vachomer you could make? Which is ma arakhin she'em machzirin, and yet mesadrim. Okay, by arakhin, there's no law. If I say I'm giving the value of someone to the temple and I don't give it, and they take a collateral from me to make sure that I give the payment, they don't return it to me every night. There's no such law. And yet there's a law of mesadrim. So Baal Chov shemachzirin, ain't no din mesadrim. So in the Baal Chov case, where we return it to you every day, there's an obligation by Torah law. Wouldn't we assume you would also be mesadrim? To which they say, why don't we make this Kal Vachomer argument? Why did they think that mesadrim for a Baal Chov? Because Amar Kra, it's a special drasha from the Psukim and arakhin. It says, Be'imach hu me'erkacha. If the person is poor and can't bring the value, now they're like missing money to live on, but it says the word who. You could just say imach me'erkacha, and it's obvious you're talking about him. So why him? Whenever we have a word like this, or bo, like on him, or this, we say, or there's an ability to make a drasha, this is unique to this situation only. This law that we're saying here, right? We always have this question. Does this create a paradigm? Can we learn from it to other cases? Or is it unique here? Well, if it says the word who, it means it's just a unique law here. Hu v'lo Baal Chov. And you can't learn from here to anywhere else. So even though theoretically you can make a Kal Vachomer argument to learn from arakhin to Baal Chov, we don't let you do this because of the word who. Now, again, we keep going back and forth. We know that there's an opinion that says mesadrim the Baal Chov because they learn Gezerah Shava from arakhin. So if you learn the Gezerah Shava from arakhin, what are you going to do with this word who? Because who sounds like only an arakhin. You'd have to do something else with that word who. So v'idach, the other side, thinks yes, mesadrim the Baal Chov because we learn it from arakhin. What are you going to do with the word who? Who here is explained to talk about the poor person. The poor person has to be poor from the beginning to the end of the process. What's the process? Well, the process is I am supposed to pay. I can't afford it. The cohen has to come and assess my net worth, what I have in my house, what are my basic needs, and give me a number. That takes time. So if between the time where I came and I said, listen, I don't have enough money, to the time where the cohen finished the assessment and I'm going to pay, what if I won the lottery? What if I, got a better job and now I have money and can afford it? Well, then I'm no longer exempt, okay? And that's why imahu, he from beginning to end, okay? That's what he means, not to exclude some other case. It's to say only if he is still poor. He has to be poor, imahu, he is poor from the beginning to the end. Okay, so that's just, what does he do with that? Now they have another question, because this is just one of those dizzying logic days. Yachzimu behekdesh Kal Vachomer mi Baal Chov. Now they're going back to this original Kal Vachomer we had today. So let's assume we still trust this opinion that there is an opinion, Baal Chov mesadrim, right? We tried to say, why wouldn't you learn a Kal Vachomer from arakhin? We said because of the word who, you can't do that. Okay, so we have this Kal Vachomer, but now they're going to say, why don't we say there is a law of having to return the collateral, which we hadn't even, until now it's been obvious, there's no law of returning the collateral for hekdesh and returning the collateral for arakhin. That was taken as a given. Why is it taken as a given? Maybe you should learn that just like it says by a creditor, you have to return the object you took as collateral every day. Maybe we'll learn also to hekdesh, that you have to return it. And how would it be? Well, okay, now this, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is a difficulty on Rabbi Yochanan, the second opinion we saw there. Remember, we saw there was a difference of opinion. Rabbi Yaakov said from Baal Chov, right? If Baal Chov lo mesadrim, then also hekdesh lo mesadrim. But Rabbi Yochanan said, no, neder be'erkacha, dafka with hekdesh, yes mesadrim, because we learn hekdesh from arakhin. So if Rabbi Yochanan learns hekdesh from arakhin about, hekdesh from arakhin about the Baal Chov mesadrim, then maybe we can make a kal v'chomer argument and say also machzirim. And how would it go? You can figure it out yourself now, because ma Baal Chov she'ein mesadrim machzirim, in a Baal Chov case, you don't have to be mesadrim. You don't have to evaluate what they are and deduct it from their what they owe, and yet machzirim, and yet you have to return it every day. So hekdesh and mesadrim, if in hekdesh there's a law of mesadrim that you have to take care of the other and deduct so that they don't owe the money, ein odin shemachzirim, wouldn't it be obvious then that the laws, if laws of collateral are more lenient, so that that the malva doesn't have to go so far out of the way to help, and yet they do have to return it every night, when it comes to that, they do. If in hekdesh you have to deduct, right, and you can't make them pay the full amount, then all the more so, hekdesh, you should learn from the Baal Chov, the creditor, that machzirim. And you also, if you took a collateral from them before they paid, you have to return it every night. So again, we're going to go with this approach of this unique pasuk in the laws of Baal Chov, a creditor, that's going to show it's only true for this case. Amar kra, v'shachav v'salmato u'berachecha. So this is when they talk about you have to give back the item to the the pajamas or the blanket to the poor person, so they have something to sleep in at night, and you will be blessed on account of this. Now, they take this word bracha. What do they say? Bracha is relevant for a person. Bracha is not relevant for the temple, for God. Okay? There's no need for the temple or God to be blessed. Okay? And therefore, it's not relevant. The pasuk where it says, return it so you'll be blessed. Okay, God doesn't need to be blessed. So the Gemara says, below, God doesn't need to be blessed. Now, there's an interesting question. What do you mean God doesn't need to be blessed? You're supposed to eat, be satiated, and bless God. We bless God all the time. God doesn't, again, need blessings, I don't know. But there is blessing by God, okay? You can't say the word blessing doesn't apply to God. Of course it does. We make blessings all the time to God. Ela amar kra, so they say, fine. Okay, that's not the right pasuk. We'll give you a different pasuk. Ela amar kra ulecha tiyet staka. And for you, it will be staka. Meaning, if you do this, remember that's what we started today. It will be staka for you. Okay, either it means you'll give charity, or this will be a righteous deed you did. Now, that clearly doesn't apply to God. Mishat sarich staka, someone who needs staka. But yatsa hekdesh ein sarich staka. Okay, the temple, God doesn't need staka, it doesn't need charity. That's not something you give to God. And therefore, that tells us this is only relevant in ben, and if we, right, the easiest way to classify these is there's ben adam lemakom, is between us and God, and then there's ben adam lechavero, and that's between us and our fellow humans. And we basically say, because of the wording of the psukim, this shows this is only for the realm of ben adam lechavero, person to their fellow human, not between us and God. Okay, and that's why we don't learn the law of machzirim to other people. Now we get off on our story. Raba bar Avuha Eliyahu. Oh, always fun when we meet Eliyahu. So Raba bar Avuha meets Eliyahu. Where does he meet Eliyahu? A very strange place. He's in a non-Jewish cemetery. Amarle. Okay, the first question he asked him, tell me if you met Eliyahu, what would be the first question you would ask? You probably never heard of the sugya mesadrim lebalcho before today, so it probably wouldn't have been the first question you would ask until yesterday. But is this law? Do you do it or not? Do you have to deduct this amount when they go to pay? Amarle says very simply, Okay, we've been struggling with this answer, struggling. Remember, we always say teku is wait till Eliyahu comes, at least some, right? Some interpret it like that. Eliyahu is the one who's supposed to, even though he's a prophet and you're not supposed to learn halacha from prophets, but theoretically, we always talk about Eliyahu as the one who's going to solve all these big doubts we have. Says very simply, Gamar micha me'arakhin. Ksera shava from arakhin. Ma gabe arakhin ktiv ve'imachu me'arkacha. Finally, they bring us the psukim. If it says there, if you're poor, right, you can't pay. Okay, if your brother becomes poor, this is, by the way, the pasuk when it talks about and he gets sold into slavery because he can't pay his debt. But it's talking about a poor person. It talks about him, someone who has to pay a debt, turning out I'm a bet. Okay, so there's your answer. So now we have a very simple answer. There is a gzeira shava. Eliyahu says it's a tradition. Question number 2, he asks Eliyahu, seemingly unconnected, but I want you to think while we're learning, what's the connection to this sugya, to where we are in the Masechet, what we're talking about, and what's the connection of these questions he asks Eliyahu? Minayin la'arom shelo yitrom. How do you know that someone who's naked can't separate the truma? Because when you separate truma to maslot, what do? You make a blessing. And if you're naked, you can't make a blessing. How do we know this? Dichtiv v'lo yireh b'cha erat davar. So Eliyahu answers him. It says you shouldn't have erbat davar. This you might remember from the last daf of Gittin. It's, this is not from the last daf of Gittin. Right, we've learned a lot. Lo yireh b'cha erbat davar. Anyway, from here, where do we get it? That you shouldn't see davar erva. Now, davar is also dibur, speech. So what we're saying here, this is a big pasuk they use for all these other things about. But anyway, we're going to leave it at that. Lo yireh b'cha ervat davar means you can't do a dibur when you have erva. So you can't make a blessing, speech, when you're naked. Third question, which you could say, those were his 2 halachic questions, whether you call this a halachic question or not, but he then says to Eliyahu, wait a minute, what are you doing here? Amar le, lav kohen humar? Are you not a kohen, Eliyahu? Okay, why is Eliyahu a kohen? Good question. Okay, we really don't know too much about him. It says he's Eliyahu Tishbi, it doesn't really say he's a kohen. But there's sources that say that Eliyahu was a gilgul, a rebirth, however you describe that exactly, of Pinchas. And Pinchas was a kohen. So, right, they're often connected because they were both Kanaim, very zealous. But if you take that literally, then Pinchas was a kohen. So thank you, reincarnation. So if he's a reincarnation of Pinchas, Pinchas was a kohen, Eliyahu was a kohen. You're a kohen. What are you doing here? My time, what are you doing in a cemetery? Amar le. So Eliyahu says to him, Lomat nemar tarot. What, have you not learned Masechet Tarot? Okay, I'll ask all of you. Have you not learned Masechet Tarot? You haven't yet. First of all, it's not in the Shas, right? Except for Nida. Otherwise, you're not going to learn Tarot. So, right, you have to learn Mishnah for that. Did you not learn Tarot? Titania. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, if you would learn Tarot, you would learn that there's a breita in Tarot that says, and it's a breita about Tarot. There is no Sechet Tarot. There's breita written there, but a breita taught about Taharot. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omil, kivreihem shalavdei kochavim em mitamim. The graves of Gentiles don't impart impurity. Okay, not the kind of impurity that's a problem to go to a cemetery of, the ohel, that if it's right, obviously means that there's a cover over it, but it also means that the tumah goes up, right, all the way up. And if you go over the airspace and kind of ma'ahil, you go over the airspace of where there's dead bodies, you become impure. But that's not relevant for Gentiles. Why not? Shene'emal, now, they don't tell you this, but the pasuk about tumat ohel is Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. And the word Adam, we're going to learn now, is only a reference to Jews. Okay, you might say, what do you mean? Adam is like the most human, basic, right? Adam Rishon was not Jewish. So this big question about this, why this is, Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam says, I think this came up in Yevamot there. He says, in Yevamot, anyway, he says that Ha-Adam means also Gentiles. Adam by itself is just Jews, that you can distinguish between the way the word is. There's other words also that talk about humans. Enosh and other things. It's not, you can't take this and say, oh, look, Jews think Gentiles aren't humans. No, of course not. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that there's different words that are used to describe Adam, humans, and the word Adam is one that's dedicated for Jews. How do we know this? We're going to see it from a verse in Yechezkel. Okay, this isn't, by the way, across the board. There are cases where Adam means Gentile also. This is just a type of drasha that's basically saying that word about Oel doesn't mean Adam, because look, in this other place, Adam clearly means Jew. Because Yechezkel says, Atem tsoni, or God says, to tell the Jewish people, right, in Sefer Yechezkel, Va'atem tsoni, son mariti, Adam atem. You are my sheep, the sheep that I graze with, right, that I take care of, I'm their shepherd. Adam atem. You are Adam. So here you see, this is reserved for the Jewish people, this word. So therefore, atem kuyim Adam, en of de kochavim kuyim Adam. The word Adam is used specifically for Jews, and therefore the pasuk about impurity of Gentiles in the Ohel is not true for Gentiles, Gentile bodies. And that's what I'm doing in the cemetery. And when Eliyahu asked him, what, did you not learn Talmud? So Avuha has to answer that, and he says, Amalei, ba'arba'ah lo matzina, b'shita matzina. I'm not even up on the 4th darim. Now you want me to be up on, like, you think I'm up on 6 of them? Okay, now which 4 is a good question. Some people say the first 4, I just haven't gotten there yet. Right, I started with Zraim, Moed, Nashim, Nezikin. I haven't gotten yet to Kodesh Tarot. Some people say, oh, well, he's Babylonian, so get rid of Zraim because Zraim wasn't relevant to him. And it's the 4 that are found in the Bavli, which is Moed, Nashim, Nezikin, Kodshim. Okay, and that those are the ones that I'm not even fully up on. You know, forget about the 2 that I haven't, that I less expected I would get to them because they're not relevant to me, right? They're relating to the land of Israel and to impurity, which isn't really relevant anymore because we don't have a temple. So, you know, I didn't get to those. Amarle, v'amai. So Eliyahu says, why didn't you get to them? What's your issue? Amarle, this is, I think, the key to the story and to understanding what this is doing here. Dechikali milta, I can't afford it. We go back and now ask, why was his number 1 question, mesadrim lebal chov? Well, he was really poor. So maybe this was a super relevant question to him. Maybe he owed money and he didn't have enough to survive on. And he wanted to know, this is the most basic question for someone like him. Okay, maybe it's not relevant to you because you're not there, but for him, this was really important. Maybe, can I make a bracha naked? Maybe he didn't have enough clothes to wear, or maybe he was worried if mesadrim lebal chov, they're going to take away my clothes, and then how am I going to make blessings to God? Right? Maybe these were real, legitimate, fair questions that he was struggling with in his daily life. So Eliyahu wants to help him. What does he do? Okay, you want to help someone, I don't know, get him a job, something like that. What does he do? Well, he brings them into Gan Eden, get some rewards and bring them back to the real world, and he'll have, you know, maybe get some wealth from there, which we'll see. Amalei pshoklim chai, said, take off your cloak, sfei ushkol mehani tarfe, and go collect from the leaves in Gan Eden. Svashakil, so he takes off his cloak, he gathers them up in his cloak, the leaves. Kiavanafik, as he's leaving with these leaves from Gan Eden, Shamadika Amar, he hears a voice saying, Man ka'achil alma keraba baravua. Who is so silly or you know, ridiculous, who's eating their share in the world to come, like Raba baravua? Why would you take your share from the world to come from Gan Eden and take it back into this world? This world is fleeting. What do you need that for in the world to come? In this world, save it for later. Like, what kind of an idiot is this person? What's he doing? Nafetz shadanu. So he lets go of everything. He leaves all the leaves in Gan Eden. He realizes, big mistake. I'm not going to be the guy that they talk about that he wasted all of his olamos share in the world to come. And he leaves. But afilu hachi ati leglime sachat glima reich. Well, he still took his cloak with him, which, by the way, is interesting, right? Otherwise, he'd be naked or something, right? In other words, he takes his cloak and he thinks, fine, I can do that. But it still had the smell from Gan Eden. And because of that, Zatne betrays alfe dinari. He was able to sell it for 12,000 dinari. But palginu lechanfanate. He divided up among all his sons-in-law because he didn't want anyone to ever say that he took his share in Olam Haba and used it in this world, and therefore he made sure to divide up the money with other people. So he stayed far away. That voice in his, kept going and reminding him that this is not what he should be doing. Okay, what do we do with this story? What does this have to do with anything? So there's a lot to be said. There's not a lot of time to say it, but what I was thinking here is that these questions he's really asking, And if you think about it, we talked about the ben adam lamakom, ben adam lachavero, and I think what here it's going on is there's minayin la'arom shelo yitrom is on the when we're making a blessing to God. It references also to talk about blessings to God. The case about the mesadrim l'balchov is on the realm of ben adam lamakom. Ben adam lachavero. And I think what's going on here is both are relating to issues of leaving someone with their dignity, right? To make a blessing naked, right? To be naked is to have no dignity, right? No kavod. Our clothing gives us, right? Clothing makes the man, or right? The clothing gives us our respect and our ability to survive, right? Both of these are issues. Now, someone who is so poor that if you take the money away from them, they're not going to be able to live. They have no dignity in this world. And what it's saying is that your responsibility in this world is to make sure that everyone's equal. Like if we talk about the idea of arakhin, the whole idea of arakhin that we've been talking about in our sugya is that valuations work like this. If you're a man, your value is X. If you're a woman, your value is Y. Okay, we're not going to get into that whole issue. That's a whole issue. But it doesn't matter, rich, poor. Your value to the temple is your value as a human. All humans are equal, even though we know that they're not exactly. Like we have this person who has no money and can't survive versus the person who's very wealthy. And what these laws are meant to do is to equalize and put everybody on the same plane and say you're all equal, right? So there's this issue of dignity in relation from human to human, ben adam lachavero, dignity, ben adam lamakom, and that's what these two questions are really addressing. And then we get to the issue of the Gentile and the comparison between Jew and Gentile. And even though these are always somewhat difficult comparisons, this one is really focusing on, I think that pasuk in Yechezkel is central. You are my tzon, adamatin. You have to keep, this goes back to the lifnim mishurat hadin. You have to keep to a higher standard. You have to, right? There's the impurity is not the same because you are my people. And that gives you, doesn't mean you're special. It means you have to keep a special level of, you have to be aware of others, tikkun olam. You have a certain role in this world and you have to fulfill that. And part of that is making sure that we equalize and that we take care of the people who need our help. And that I think is really the concept that's going on here. Okay, Tanu Rabbanit. Now we're just going to finish up with some brightot, learning out some of the laws we saw, maybe some new ones about this collateral issue. And reminder to listen to Alana Stein-Hain's shiur all about taking collateral. Tanu Rabbanan, v'im ish anihu lo tishkav bavoto. If he's poor, don't sleep with his collateral, like with his blanket or his pajamas. So now they say what? Ha'ashir shachit. If he was rich and you took the item as collateral, you could sleep in his pajamas. Are you allowed to use a mashkon? No, you're supposed to put it on your shelf in a drawer, put it away. You're not allowed to use it. So my kamar, what is this brayta saying? Amrav sheshet hachi kamar. Read it like this. Ve'im ish anihu lo tishkav va'avoto etzlecha. Ha'ashir shachit va'avoto etzlecha. If he's poor, don't sleep with the mashkon in your house. If he's rich, you can leave it in your house, but not that you could sleep with it in bed with you. Tanu Rabbanan, second brayta. This one's really not going to make any sense. Okay, this we learned in the beginning. You can't go into the house and take the mashkon. But you don't need to return it to him if you took it. Of course you need to return it to him. We just talked about that. Okay. And if you don't return it, you transgress all these things. So that doesn't make any sense. My kamar, what does this mean? First explanation. Amrav sheshet hachi kamar. Just change one word and the whole thing will make sense. You can't seize it, right, without going to the house. But in mishkeno, if you did, well then chayav lachzir lo. If you took it anyway against the law, still, right, you're still obligated to return it every day. And you're going to transgress all those verses that say, give it back to him, don't sleep with it, blah, blah, blah. And that's referring to the Sefer, to what we just said. Rava gives a different explanation. Rava amar hachi kamar. This is the way it should read. You're not allowed to go into the house and take a mashkon. Now here we're going to add a whole bunch of words. Ve'im mishkeno chayav lachzir lo. And if you did, you have to return it, okay? Now, but they're going to get to a case where you don't have to return it, and that will, instead of changing the words on the brayta, they just add all these extra words. So if you did, you have to return it. When is this referring to? This all, by the way, that you have to return it, is if you took the mashkon not at the time you took out the loan, or he took out, Shiur, or he took out the loan, but at the time that it's supposed to be, right, you're supposed to return, the person's supposed to return it. Then you seize the mashkon, because that's what we said. That's what all these laws are referring to. But mishkano b'shat habato, if when you took out the loan, the borrower said, listen, I'm going to give you an item, just to promise I'll give it back, in that situation, and that's what we said from the beginning, you don't have to return the item, because that's not what these verses are referring to. These verses are referring to when you took it at the end, when they didn't pay and you seized the collateral, right, by the court. And then that refers to the Resha. Now, right, because the Resha talked about when you take the collateral by law, right, when after the time, once the court seizes it. The last part we just said is actually referring to a case when you don't have to return it, which is a different kind of mashka. That obviously isn't, you don't transgress all those psukim, so it's going back to the beginning. Tani Rav Shizbi Kamei de Raba, and some what basically defines all these brightot is their simple reading doesn't really make a lot of sense. Ad bo hashemesh tishivenu lo, okay, until, right, before the sun sets, return it to him. Zok sut laila, sorry, ad bo hashemesh, sorry, until the sun rises, return it to him. Zok sut laila, that's something he needs at night. You return it, okay, now, until the morning you return it to him, meaning, one second, let me just, this is what confused me before, one second. Until the sun rises, right, ad bo hashemesh, until the sun rises, you should return it, right? Make sure to return it in the morning, okay? Hashev, which is the opposite. That's going to be the problem here. How to define these is very confusing, because Bo Hashemesh could be the sun rises, the sun sets. It's very confusing. Hashev tashiv lo et avot kivo Hashemesh, return it to him when the sun sets. Kivo Hashemesh is when the sun sets. Zok sut yom, that's something he needs during the day. So now they say, I'm related. What do you need? The one, you don't need the day one to return to them at night, and you don't need the night one to return to them by day. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm related. So the guy who brought the Breita, the Rav Shizbi brought this Breita to Rabbi. He says, well, you want me to erase this Breita? It's a wrong, incorrect Breita. I'm related low. He said, no, reread it. Again, rereading of a Breita. Okay, so now we're going to say Abo Hashemesh is until sunset, return it. Zok sut yom shenitna lachvo balayla. This, sorry, Abo Hashemesh until the sunrise, sorry. Till the sunrise, return it. That's the ksut yom shenitna lachvo balayla. Or you could say, again, it all really depends how you read it. Until the sunset, return it to him might mean at sunset you can take it back, because that's the ksut yom that you can take back at sunset. Okay, there's different ways to read this. It's a little, it's quite confusing. Hashev tashiv lo et avot kivo hashemesh. So this means, right, return it to him when the night comes. Instead of saying that's what they basically did here is instead of saying ksut yom and ksut laila, they said ksut, what we call ksut laila is really ksut yom. It's the clothing of the day that you're allowed to take at night. That's what the laila had to do with it. And the ksut laila is shenitna lachbo bayom. In other words, when we say ksut yom, what it really meant is something you use at night that you're allowed to take during the day. Okay, and that's how they just resolved this confusing Breita. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, last point for today. Mishkeno umet shomtome al gabe banav. If you take a mashkon and then the guy dies, and then you had given it back, let's say, you're allowed, and the guy died at night, let's say you gave it to him at night, and the person died, you can take it from the children. So now we're going to have a problem with the Breita. Wait, so this Breita makes no sense. Okay, he says, since you take the mashkon, why do you return it? To which the Gemara says, wait, lama machzirin rachmana amar ehader. What do you mean? If you take the mashkon, why do you have to return it? What do you mean? The Torah said you have to return it. We understand why you have to return. We just spent a few dapim explaining why you have to return it. So they basically explained it some other way, which is going to contradict this halacha Rabbi Yochanan said. And that we'll get to in the next stuff. So with that, we'll finish. We'll just do a quick review. We started with this question of maush, mesadrim, the balchov, lo mesadrim. From there, in order to find an answer, we brought this thing about hekdesh. Is there a mesadrim for hekdesh or not? And we tried all those different kaf-chomer. Why did we try this one? Why did we use that one? How did we learn all these things? That was the whole first part. Then we got to the story of Eliyahu, which I think was really central to this chapter, and perhaps even to the whole Masechet, really, about this whole idea of human interactions and how we have to care for fellow humans. And even though they might owe us money, you have to consider other factors as well. And then we ended with a bunch of brightot that each would typify them. Number one, they were all drashot getting to halachot that we've seen before, or maybe new ones like the Mishkano make. But also, we were getting to these brightot that all had issues in them, and we had to kind of re-edit them and figure out what they really meant. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.